In this lesson, we'll talk about how group culture and expectations can be described in a code of conduct and how to approach creating one for your team. Codes of conduct are being increasingly used across organizations to clarify the standards and behavioral expectations for the way that employees act themselves and interact with one another, as well as to establish reporting protocols and resources for an employee if an incident does occur. Let's start off with a general definition. A code of conduct is a document with elements that are ideally built by group consensus to develop team culture and to establish group norms so that everyone feels comfortable and supported. At a high level, a code of conduct is an opportunity for us to envision how we want our field team to operate. It can set a tone for our group culture, can make expectations explicit, and it gives us a shared framework for holding each other accountable towards supporting group and individual success. We suggest that a code of conduct be made up of 3 parts: rules and guidelines, values statement, and norms agreement. The first part includes existing rules and standards. This may be a set of guidelines or standards that are required by a scientist's institution for field activities or by a hosting field facility. These are likely existing documents or procedures that can be easily adopted and integrated into a code of conduct. If you have a standard set of guidelines from your organization or operating rules from a field station that you are expected to adhere to, you can filter through existing language to determine which are relevant for your field team, and that becomes part 1 of your code of conduct. Now, just to clarify, the idea is not to take the full set of institutional guidelines and copy them into the code of conduct for your team. Pull out only the ones that are specifically relevant. For example, alcohol policies in field facilities, or expectations around driving of an organization's vehicles and insurance, things like that. If you are building these rules and requirements from the ground up, consider asking your organization's risk management contact person if there are existing expectations or rules for teams operating in non-traditional working environments, and potentially in remote locations without consistent telecommunication, etc. You can use these expectations as a framework for developing this section of the Code of Conduct. Then augment these expectations with risk management standards that are non-negotiable, as seen by your field team leader or senior group members with substantial field experience. Thus, they do not require group discussion, even if they are not mandated by an institution. So, for example, structural rules like a 2-body rule to never conduct field work alone, or never walking outside of a designated perimeter camp on Glacier. Add these to your rules and requirements section. Processes for reporting are important to include in your code of conduct to make sure everyone is aware of what they are, and they fit well here in part 1 of the code of conduct. You might wonder why reporting processes need to be spelled out. Let's have a look at this figure showing responses from a survey of over 600 field scientists to understand academic field experiences as it relates to gendered experiences, sexual harassment, and assault. Male survey respondents are represented by blue dots, and female respondents are represented by red. Among several stories told by this figure, this data demonstrates how few people were aware of reporting mechanisms of unwanted physical contact. Now, this is something that we can easily address by including defined reporting structures in the Code of Conduct. Recall from Module 1 the in-team safety and communication plan, which suggested developing communication and reporting processes in the event of an incident. Those processes or flowcharts can be included in Part 1 of a Code of Conduct as well. A quick reminder to check out the resources in our toolkit that will help guide you in developing this plan. Now, I want to mention a few specific things to consider about reporting pathways. Mandatory reporters. Make sure to highlight for your whole team who is a mandatory reporter. That is, someone who may not legally be able to maintain confidentiality. Anonymous reporting. Some individuals do not want to go through the legal process of reporting, so providing an anonymous reporting avenue would be more beneficial for those people. Institutional reporting processes. If there are established processes for your organization, make sure to become familiar with those if you would be expected to implement them from the field. If established reporting processes are not appropriate for your field campaign due to the unique working environment, your team resources, or your communication capabilities, it's an opportune time to raise this with your organization's leadership and flag to them that you may need to use a different reporting flow. Now, finally, you may choose to include a section providing guidelines for dispute resolution, including language for managing a dispute and documenting the conflict, who will evaluate the complaint, and potential consequences. You can also include sections on how to support victims and targets. Now, this topic will be discussed in the bystander intervention training in Module 4. Part 2 of a code of conduct is a values statement. A value statement is a high-level summary of the key attributes you aspire to for your field team and your field experience. It can be helpful for capturing the overall goals of your group and for setting the vibe. The norms agreement, which is going to be discussed more in a moment, is used to specify the behaviors that lead to the bigger picture, character and values captured by your value statement. A value statement is optional, and if you are time limited in your field preparations, you may choose to skip this part. However, for teams that will be working together over longer timeframes, or for field stations or long-term programs that have a sustained character or reputation, this can be an important exercise for establishing priorities on the way that you operate to characterize how you want to treat yourselves and how you want others to view you from the outside. Let's hear from a voice from the field about why value-based codes of conduct can lead to a more relatable, effective, and powerful code.
I know that I personally don't respond very well when I feel that a set of rules is arbitrary or when I don't understand the reasoning behind it. And that's true in a kind of social setting or, the rules of this organization or this school or whatever. And it's even true in a legal setting. If I can understand the reasoning behind a given set of guidelines or principles, even if I don't agree, it's a lot easier for me to get behind it. I would prefer to say, hey, here's what I'm really hoping we can achieve together. And that is because here's what I value. And I hope that you can get excited and that you value those things too. And if we all can commit to valuing these things, then we can agree on a set of guidelines that is going to help us achieve those intended outcomes. And through that sort of collective participatory process, we can ultimately generate a code of conduct together and buy into it together. And I think that sort of process where we link a code of conduct not to some absolute rules, but rather to a shared sense of values and commitments and a dynamic response to the current circumstances, I think that's going to make a code of conduct feel much more personalized and accessible and exciting for participants.
Now, depending on how much time you have as a team, an optional activity is to brainstorm and consolidate the high-level values that you see as guiding your field work, your field team or your station, and your lab group, or even your department. You can do this on a virtual platform using a virtual whiteboard, or you can do it in person using clusters of Post-its on a wall or a pinboard. To synthesize your brainstorm, consider using a word cloud software to capture keyword themes, or you could take it a step further and you could categorize the descriptors into emerging themes such as group culture, interpersonal relationships, tasks, functions, ethics, etc. Part 3 is your group norms agreement. The norms agreement is the part of the code of conduct that can set up a positive group culture that works across varying personal backgrounds and needs. And therefore, it is an important foundation for a successful field campaign. It is typically a descriptive document generated by the team detailing a specific group culture, interpersonal dynamics, communication practices, and elements of camp and group life and expeditioning, to name some of the most typical topics. Defining these elements of your field experience will front-load what is needed to create a comfortable and safe space and working environment for everyone on the team. These are based on the needs of individuals within the specific group and/or the environment. For small to medium-sized groups, the norms agreement is best created through group discussion and ideally by consensus, a decision-making style that you may recall from Module 2, where everyone participates in the discussion and can agree to support the document even if it may not be their ideal. Doing it in this way is important so that everyone has an opportunity to voice their needs and their vision for the field experience. If you're wondering what topics are typically covered in a norms agreement or what this development process actually looks like, later in this module, we will demonstrate one way to create a norms agreement using a customizable template based on topics that come up regularly in our facilitation of norms agreement discussions. Topics included in this template include communication, maintaining group expedition mentality, culture of respect, leadership, private spaces, and logistics. Remember, you can find that template in the Advancing Field Safety Toolkit. For more ideas of ways to approach a norms agreement, have a look through the Code of Conduct examples in our toolkit, and you'll notice a few other strategies. A roommate bill of rights, a no ask out policy during the field campaign, how to respond if you've been called out, among others. These examples are loaded with thoughtful ideas on how to proactively set high standards for interpersonal interactions in the field. So check them out. Now, while most of a norms agreement is geared towards describing the environment we're seeking to create, it can also be helpful to call out prohibited behaviors and their consequences to ensure clarity around behavior that is not tolerated within the team. If you're wondering what this can look like, several of the codes of conduct in our toolkit, for example, those from Tulick Field Station and Harvard Forest, they begin with expected and prohibited behaviors, minor to serious, and the expected consequences. Calling out prohibited behaviors may be especially important within multicultural teams, in which acceptable behavior and communication may differ across cultures. Stay tuned for more on this in Module 7. After you've created your code of conduct, consider having every member sign the code. For a field team, it is a powerful practice. This level of buy-in holds team members accountable to the expectations established in the code of conduct. It acknowledges the consequences if they breach the agreement, and it allows the group to circle back to the code of conduct if conflicts do arise. Creating a code of conduct is an iterative process. It can be a living document that is expected to change over time. So if you realize that it is not fit for purpose once you get into the field, it can be amended through a group process similar to its creation. Now, a final point. Some institutions or funding agencies have their own guidelines and approval processes related to codes of conduct. So, in review, we suggest that a code of conduct be made up of 3 parts: rules and guidelines, institutional requirements, and established processes. Value statement, high-level attributes that help set the tone for your group's character and goals. And a norms agreement, specific structures and behaviors that your team will implement to create positive, supportive group culture. In the next video, we'll talk about how to build a code of conduct, including facilitating a consensus-based norms agreement.